It may be the coldest war in Washington right now. I'm talking about Donald Trump versus his own intelligence community. Now, the next victim of the war, it very well will be the guy on your screen, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats. He was once a widely respected Republican senator, but this doesn't seem to matter to his boss. I'm talking about Donald Trump. Coats, after all, he's occasionally criticized the president, and he contradicted the president's position on some key intel issues. Again, these aren't his opinion. He was stating intelligence agencies' findings, and he did this all before Congress. So, reports are now widely circulating that Trump, he wants Coats out. But it's not just Coats. Trump, he's long been at war with his intel experts. And for more, let's bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. And there's no shortage of people here who've made the horrible sin of telling the truth.
Yeah, and on topics that are critically important, Rich, and surprisingly, Trump's attacks on our intelligence agencies, agents, and leaders began even before he was elected president. During the campaign, he accused the intel community of lying to help get the U.S. into the Iraq War. Most experts looking back now blame Dick Cheney and others for cherry-picking the intel to launch the war, but not the agencies as a whole. Now, once in office, Trump began skipping the written presidential daily briefings, reportedly relying on oral presentations and pictures, graphs, and other ways of keeping the info simple and likely incomplete. And now he's attacked his intel agencies on a slew of topics, including not prosecuting Hillary Clinton, or their claims that Russia attacked our elections, including the one that elected, Donald Trump, on Iran, countering Trump's claim that they violated the nuclear deal with the U.S. Trump even revoked the security clearance of former CIA Director John Brennan, a move widely criticized by past and present intel leaders. And then there was Trump's Israeli intelligence snafu. The day after Trump fired James Comey, he met with two key Russian officials in the Oval Office, a meeting the White House didn't reveal until the Russians did. In that meeting, Trump shared classified information that exposed the work of Israeli intelligence. Israel's response? Limiting what intelligence they would now share with the U.S. But the final straw came last month in a U.S. Senate hearing room.
We expect Russia will continue to wage its information war against democracies and to use social media to attempt to divide our societies. North Korea will seek to retain its WMD capabilities and is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capabilities because its leaders ultimately view nuclear weapons as critical to regime survival.
Trump's response attacked the intel community again, calling them passive and naive, wrong, and ending with, quote, perhaps intelligence should go back to school. Rich?
Andrew, thank you very much. Joining us now for more is the Georgetown University adjunct professor John Walcott, also an award-winning journalist covering foreign policy and national security. Professor, thanks for the time. I kind of like to start from the beginning. From those of us on the outside, a PDB, these daily briefings, and the intelligence briefers who go before every president, what do they understand their job to be, and what kind of resources do they bring when they tell the president basically what's going on around the world?
It's pretty straightforward, Richard. They bring to bear $81 billion worth of intelligence collected from everything from satellites to spies. And their job is to present that to the president without any political overtones, not skewed by any personal viewpoints, to be as straightforward as they can in saying, here's what we think. And then the second really important element is how much confidence do they have in it? Is it low confidence? Is it medium confidence? Or is it high confidence? That's how they grade their own work.
You know, I read a piece that you did a couple weeks ago in a Time magazine article, and you talk about for the first time at that point, these briefers went public, albeit anonymously, to talk about the real concerns they had with the attack the president had, calling the intelligence chiefs basically taking positions other than the ones that he had taken publicly, passive, naive. He said they ought to go back to school. Take the politics, if it's possible, out of this, John. How scared are they that the ultimate boss isn't reading the briefings and believes that it's the job of the intelligence agencies and the DNI and all the other people in between to sing the president's song other than what they are finding, as you said, with the $81 billion the American public's investing, as the realities on the ground?
I think the universal view in the intelligence community, at least among the professionals, is that it's extremely dangerous, in part because it leaves the president without all the information he needs to make good decisions, relying on his impulses and his instincts rather than the intelligence that's available. And second, it leaves him vulnerable to people on the outside, Vladimir Putin in Russia, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, President Xi Jinping in China, who are able to manipulate him because of that ignorance. And we've seen some examples of that recently. What happened historically is he got off on the wrong foot with the intelligence agency, went out to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, stood in front of the wall of stars they have that memorializes people, most of whose names we will never know, who lost their lives in the intelligence business, stood in front of that wall and talked about himself.
You know, you've forgotten more than I have, Professor, on this, but every presidential biography I've ever read, they all talk about how it doesn't matter who the occupant of the White House is. When he sat in the chair and he's gotten these briefings, they've all been shocked at the depth and the scope of our intelligence, and that they are realizing just how big a world it is with how many dangers. There's never been a situation, not that they've always liked, in fact, everyone hasn't, as I understand it, some of the briefings they get, because if they want to get out of a hot spot and they tell about the consequences, they may not want to hear it, but at least they listen. This is the first time in memory that somebody believes by gut, not off of reading, not off of experience, not off of even listening, believes he knows more than all the intel agencies, the satellite spy agency, everyone that goes into putting together these reports. And it has put people at a loss as to what to do, how to convey to someone that when you have a situation like McCabe in his book recounts, they say, listen, the North Koreans, they're doing these ballistic tests. And he says, no, they're not. And then finally they say, well, where do you get this, Mr. President? He said, well, Putin tells me so. We've never gone through anything like this before, and we're in uncharted territory. Does it scare the bejesus out of them, or does it more frustrate these intelligence experts that say either he doesn't want to know or he's getting played?
It's frustrated them from the start, Richard, but now they're becoming more and more alarmed at what could go wrong. But the frustration has now given way, not just in the intelligence community, but in the military, to some real alarm about the possibility for bad decisions. The other thing is the president doesn't always take the briefings. There was one period of more than 80 days when he was briefed 7 times.
We talk about our own intelligence agencies and the concerns and the frustrations, but how much, Professor, is there a concern with our own allies about sharing intel? And I go back early on to the administration when the president shared with the Russians confidential Israeli intelligence. I gotta think people are thinking twice before sharing with us, and it's in the American national safety interest here to know these things, but if they're worried the president's gonna repeat this to an adversary, I'd assume they'd think twice.
It's a great question, and the sad truth of it is that there are debates, even among our closest allies, the group that's called the Five Eyes, English-speaking countries, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United States. In every one of those capitals, every one of those intelligence agencies, there are second thoughts about providing information that might be shared with the president, that the president might then share or go public with.
Finally, Dan Coates, if, as the reporting is out there, if it's accurate that he's on a banana peel right now from the president because the president's frustrated, he contradicted him, what kind of a message would that send that our DNI would be given as walking papers for speaking truth to power, a truth that basically everybody acknowledges? What kind of a message is that going to send the people left behind?
It reinforces the message that the president does not want to hear things that contradict his views in public. It has reinforced the idea that you've got to be very, very careful talking to this guy. And worst of all, I think it's presented people at the very highest levels of the government, some of them at least, with the decision whether to speak truth to power or to risk their lives doing that, or whether they should simply get along by going along.
it really, I think, with all the fire hose of craziness we deal with, I just think we're going to look back on this chapter and just, it's mind-boggling what we've come to, where we can't give actual intelligence to the president and have your job potentially if you tell him what's really going on. But Professor Walcott, I really appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone, when we come back, we'll switch gears. You know, it's the story of the day, from accuser to arrested. The case of Empire actor Jussie Smollett. We're going to take a look at the story itself, but also what it tells us about where we are as a country right now at this point in time.